Well, 40 years ago, Louise Brown was dubbed the first test tube baby. She made headlines around the world for becoming the first person ever to be conceived through in vitro fertilization, a treatment that's now resulted in 8 million babies being born, including thousands here in Canada. Carolynn Dubé is the Executive Director of Fertility Matters Canada, and she joins me now this morning from Moncton. Good morning, Carolynn.
Good morning.
Let's start with this, too. We want to share some numbers with people, too. 1 in 6 couples experience infertility. We know that about 10,000 Canadians undergo fertility treatments each year. What's the state of those fertility treatments in Canada now compared to 40 years ago?
Well, as you can imagine, technology has grown in leaps and bounds over the past 40 years. We are so fortunate in Canada because we have access to amazing medical professionals in amazing clinics across this country. And so for patients who are here in Canada, we're really, we have the ability to access care that we didn't have 40 years ago, considering when the first IVF cycles were going through, you had about a 5% chance of taking home a baby at the end of your cycle. And in Canada now, you know, at any given transfer, you have about a 40% chance of taking home a baby at the end of that cycle.
So it's 40% too. How does that compare to natural fertilization or any other methods too that people might be using?
Sorry, say that again.
I'm just wondering too, so you said 40%, right, for when it comes to how effective IVF is. How does that compare to natural fertilization for anybody who is trying to get pregnant?
So if you're conceiving naturally, it's about it's under 20% in any given month, considering that all conditions are perfect, timing. So it's much more effective actually. And so when you're struggling to conceive and you have a reproductive health issue, it's an incredible technology to be able to access.
Now, the topic of conception is hard to discuss, right? We mentioned 1 in 6 couples affected by infertility, 25% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. Now, you've had personal experience yourself with IVF, with your son being born back in 2013. We know it's never okay to ask someone when they're having a baby, but do you feel, as someone who's gone through this, that stigma isn't as bad as it was even 10, 20 years ago, and people are getting more comfortable to talk about this topic?
Absolutely. With the rise of social media, people have had access to more information. More celebrities are coming out on their Instagram feeds and Twitter to talk about how they've struggled. This has become a norm. The reality is that 1 in 6 Canadians, 1 in 8 Americans are struggling to build their families. And so as we talk about this and become more public, we actually are giving the ability to patients to realize that they're not alone. This is not an anomaly, and they actually have access to amazing support networks and medical care across the country. And that's why I advocate, and I ask people to share their stories when they're feeling comfortable.
Yeah, now we talk about that access and we talk about that care, though, as well, Carolynn. In Canada, only 4 provinces offer some sort of financial help for fertility treatments. Fertility clinics, not common everywhere. In fact, majority of them are actually here in Toronto. Now, because of that, only 20% of infertile couples seek help. What do you want to see happen in order to help more families that are dealing with infertility?
Well, you're absolutely right. Only about 20% of the people in this country who actually need treatment can access it. And it's because we live in a very large country. People who live in Thunder Bay, it is very difficult for them to get to a downtown Toronto clinic every second morning for 3 weeks in a row. We also only have 4 provinces who provide financial support to patients. Mm-hmm. And as a result, this very effective technology is also really, really expensive. And as a young couple or young individual who's just finished school, just got their job, got a car payment and a mortgage, it's very expensive to put up $15,000 or $20,000 in the hope that maybe you may have a baby. And so I hope that more provinces consider that this is a medical disease. The World Health Organization defines infertility as a disease of the reproductive health system. in Canada, we need to recognize that and consider providing funding options across this country, province by province, so that more patients can gain access.